February the 6th, 2026. Guys, we're looking at information about the Save America Act, and we've talked about it online before on the live streams, but it's so important that everyone needs to pay very close attention to it, and if you have any influence or can contact your senators, it won't do you any good if you're a Democrat or you have a Democratic senator, but because they are totally against it because it would disallow them to cheat on the upcoming elections. And what they're talking about is, again, the Save America Act would require ID to vote in federal elections and proof of citizenship to register. Now, of course, why would the Dems be violently upset about this? Because they know they can't get elected in a fair election without cheating. They're called demons. Their father is the father of lies, and it's evident when we watch them. Anyway, this is key. So if you're in a state with a Republican, then you need to call their office. This is going to happen next week. It's got to happen by the 13th. Anyway, call their offices. Take a stand just a little bit. Take a little bit of energy and call them and tell them you want to make sure that your Republican senators and congressmen vote for the SAVE Act. Very important. Trump he said he'd sign it immediately. He's thrown his weight behind the bill, and this week he's called for the nationalization of elections. And I know that a lot of people don't keep up with politics, but guys, this is going to affect every person in the nation. Everybody. And you've seen them talk about they're going to keep up with who the ICE agents are, where they live. They're going to dox them. They're going to bring them to court. They're going to prosecute them. And that's going to be everybody that voted for Trump. But it says the legislation backed by Trump is scheduled for a vote in the House of Representatives next week amid a pressure campaign from right-wing commentators, many in the congressional GOP. It sets up a showdown with Democrats and voting rights advocates who say such a proposal could disenfranchise millions of Americans. Now, I'm looking at CNBC, the stock market channel. They're very libtarded, okay? But I wanted to see what both sides are saying in this battle and how the Democrats are projecting it. And they follow the paperwork goes out to mainstream media to tell them what to say. Same time it goes to the senators and congressmen and tells them what to say. Same puppet master. Anyway, it says it's set up as a showdown. Democrats and voting rights advocates, again, who say such a proposal would disenfranchise millions of Americans. They're not American citizens. It says, and with Senate Republican leaders who are fielding calls to change the filibuster and clear a path to passage. Now, whether or not Thune has the you-know-what to go through with this, I don't know. But what we have, a rhino is someone that intentionally votes against the conservative party. Then you have really chicken, yellow-streaked Republicans that are afraid that if they do it, anything they do, the Democrats will do it to them in the next election. And that's the most cowardly thing you can do. If someone's slapping you and beating you up, or you're not going to get up and hit them back because you're afraid they'll hit you back, you're already getting your tail beat. Fight. And what you do is don't worry about it. Just make sure that you do what the voters say in Congress, in the Senate, and the House, and you won't have to worry about losing the elections. How about that? Anyway, they say, how could it disenfranchise millions of Americans, guys? How? It's just the opposite. It makes our votes count. American elections are rigged, stolen, and a laughing stock all over the world. This is from Trump on Truth Social. We're either going to fix them or we won't have a country any longer, and he's exactly right. The president urged passage of a bill dubbed the Save America Act, which would require the government-issued photo ID to cast a ballot and proof of citizenship just to register to vote. Fair enough. We all have to do it. But guys, we have so many problems still in the Republican Party. You saw Bundy and Patel. How do they think we're so stupid we can be distracted that easily with the Benghazi deal when they need to be in Minnesota and in California? And they brought someone back from Benghazi, but who was running the Benghazi deal? Wasn't that Obama, Susan Rice, Hillary, that group? Think about it. But no, they can't. They're not going to go after the real crooks. So Bundy and Patel, we hoped for the best, but it looks like we've got some major, again, Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, problems, even going to Comey. Hate to say it, but you're not going to fool this old man. Anyway, continues. It says the Democrats are among those who bristle at the proposals. They're about the only ones, except maybe a few rhinos, which are rooted in Trump's unfounded claims that elections are rife with fraud and come in the context of the president's recent comments about nationalizing elections and the FBI raid of Georgia election office last week, where Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was present. They don't want you to look at any of the crooked voting things. They don't want you to have to be, you don't have to be legal to vote, because they can't win. If they can't win all the districts, they're going to lose a lot of their grifting power. And they think they may have a chance of going to jail. But with our current DOJ, and I hate to say it, I don't know if any of these crooks are ever going to go to jail. The little guys will, while the big fish that really caused Benghazi, for example, and the leaders in Minnesota, the governor, the mayor, same in California, same in New York, while they walk around. What kind of protection do they have that you and I don't have? That's why I'm saying there's something rotten in Denmark when it comes to our justice system, still there. But it says, of course, Schumer said this week the voter ID proposal would be dead on arrival in the Senate and likened the bill introduced by Chip Roy, Republican from Texas, and Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, to Jim Crow 2.0. Guys, it's incredible what they say. And it's dead on arrival in the Democratic part of the Senate. But it's not dead on arrival yet. That bill has got to go through. That's the only way to save the nation. It's so critical that if Trump will have to make some other type of move if it doesn't get to his desk. Now, some of these libtard groups, like the Brennan Center and other people like that, they're saying the documentary proof of citizenship provisions would be extremely burdensome for a lot of Americans. My God, they're not Americans, first of all. Maybe South American, but they're not U.S. citizens. Most Americans don't have a driver's license or ID. Then why in the hell don't they? Again, this is coming from the Brennan Center and a few other of the libtard groups, but I'm reading it on purpose so that you see the opposition. It says most Americans don't have a driver's license or ID that indicates that they are a U.S. citizen. Nicole Hansen, policy counsel at the Campaign Legal Center, said in an interview, "We really view the bill as part of a broader effort by the president and his allies in Congress to sow the seeds to question election results in 2026 that they don't like." No, guys, what can I say? The general concept of voter ID requirements had broad public support, with voting rights advocates cautioning the devil is in the details. According to an August 2025 Pew poll, 95% of Republicans and 71% of Democrats favor voter ID. It's just not the crooks in the swamp. 84% of American supporters support voter ID, and 83% support proof of citizenship to register to vote. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections anyway. And guys, they're saying that, again, it's not going to pass the Senate, but we're dealing with local elections, state and county elections, and then federal elections. The federal election law is already in place that you have to have voter ID and all, but no one, if you're not checking the polls, is going to know that. And with all these mail-in ballots, you see these things dumping bags of ballots into the mailbox, guys, all with the same signature, things like that. They're saying, but with Democrats vowing to block the bill, Senate passage is unlikely. Because of Senate procedural rules and the balance of power in that chamber, Democratic votes are needed for legislation to advance there. That's why the filibuster's got to go down, and you can get down to that 50 vote instead of 60 vote rule. Separate proposal also introduced by Roy and similarly called the SAVE Act would have barred non-citizen voting but did not have a voter ID component. Federal law already bars non-citizens from voting in federal elections, but there are provisions for them to vote in some lower-level elections. Who did that? You know who did it. The House voted 220-208 in favor of the bill in April, with 4 Democrats in support, but it has not yet gotten a vote in the Senate. This has caused some members to call for eliminating the filibuster, of course, as it has been practiced since the 1970s, and revert back to a standing filibuster made famous, they're saying, by the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It requires dissenting members to actively hold the floor in order to block legislation. The modern-day filibuster is a perversion of how the Senate was supposed to function. Instead of arguing positions and attempting to pass legislation, it has become a way to avoid doing the work and to block the president's agenda in the name of institutional supremacy. Mr. Thune, you're the one blocking it. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, Republican from Florida, one of the most vocal in the House group, calling for the passage of the voter ID, posted on X this week. And guys, she's talking about the senators on the Republican side. They've got to act. And Luna she floated the idea of tacking the Save American Act onto the larger must-pass legislation down the line, just like everyone else does. We should nuke what's called the zombie filibuster, which is the ability for Democrats to filibuster it without lifting a finger. And that we should require an old-fashioned talking filibuster. This is coming from Cruz, but Senate Majority Leader Thune, Republican South Dakota, who has promised to vote on the version of the Republican election bill, expressed skepticism about filibuster reform. He says, we will get a vote on the SAVE Act at some point. But with respect to the filibuster, I think we all know where the votes are on that. Again, they're either complete rhinos or they're chicken. Cowards, which most of them are. Now, guys, I went into the last Senate hearing that they've had, and what I did was, of course, cut out 90% of it, all the stale part, all of the demons, and all I left in here was Thune and Barrasso. And I want you to hear what they're saying and, read between the lines. And again, keep pressure on your Republican senators and congressmen to pass the SAVE Act. Anyway, guys, check this out. It's not that long. We're watching it. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.
Mr. President, we have 1 week and 1 day left to pass the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. Democrats demanded a tight timeline for the DHS continuing resolution. Republicans warned Democrats repeatedly that such a short timeline would be challenging, if not impossible. But to prevent Democrats from shutting down a big part of the government and denying paychecks to soldiers and federal workers, we ultimately gave it to them. Now the onus is on Democrats to negotiate in good faith and reach an agreement quickly. Notice I said negotiate, Mr. President. This is not a blank check situation where Republicans just agree to a list of Democrat demands. Democrats had previously agreed to a Homeland Security appropriations bill which included additional money for body cameras as well as de-escalation training for immigration and customs enforcement officers and additional oversight funds, of funds that have already been appropriated to DHS. Those are all things that were agreed upon when that bill was initially negotiated and supported by Democrats in the House and the Senate. Well, now, Mr. President, they've reopened negotiations, and that means taking up ideas and priorities from both sides. We need to have a serious discussion about the climate of harassment and worse that law enforcement officers have been facing for simply trying to do their jobs. We also need to address the issue of cooperation between local and federal law enforcement. Too many jurisdictions prohibit local law enforcement from cooperating with immigration and customs enforcement, a situation that makes things more dangerous for everyone. The President's border czar, Tom Homan, yesterday announced that the Department of Homeland Security will be withdrawing 700 federal agents from Minnesota, in large part because of increased cooperation from local law enforcement. So I hope my Democrat colleagues are ready to have some conversations with the White House about these and other issues. The White House has demonstrated that it's taking things seriously, and it has already resulted in body cams for all officers deployed to Minneapolis and, as I said, the drawdown of federal agents thanks to the increased cooperation from local law enforcement that Tom Homan has facilitated. I want to see my Democrat colleagues take things seriously as well. Mr. President, I'd also like to remind Democrats that they are putting funding for some critical government agencies in jeopardy. TSA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center are all funded by the DHS appropriations bill. I think all Americans remember the travel disaster Democrats created by shutting down the government for 43 days last fall. So Democrats failed to agree to a DHS funding bill and shut down the TSA. As a result, there's a very good chance we could see more travel problems. I'd also like to remind my Democrat colleagues that the only way to get any reforms at ICE is to agree to a bill. A CR would not include any of the reforms already included, as I said earlier, in the DHS bill, which they helped negotiate and supported before they changed their mind and didn't support it. And a CR certainly wouldn't include any new reforms. The Democrat leader was complaining about the announcement about body cams for federal officers in Minneapolis, asking why it wasn't for the whole country. Well, Mr. President, I'd like to remind him that the DHS bill we negotiated already includes money for additional body cameras, somewhere on the order of $20 million for additional body cameras. The Democrat leader also complained that he doesn't trust the administration's reforms and that we need a law. Well, getting a law is well within Democrats' power. But again, Democrats have to be willing to actually reach an agreement. If they're coming to the table demanding a blank check or refusing to consider any measures but their own, they're likely to end up with nothing, which is fine if Democrats just want a political issue. But if they actually want to do something, then again, they're going to have to be willing to reach agreement with the White House on a final bill. 1 week and 1 day more, Mr. President. That is the timeline that the Democrats demanded, and I say demanded, and actually got. They were granted. After having negotiated a 6-bill package, which included the DHS appropriations bill, they decided, no, we're not going to do that, People want to blame the White House. They want to blame Republicans. Republicans had nothing to do with that. It passed the House, the 6-bill package, including the DHS appropriations bill, with 341 votes in the U.S. House of Representatives. Almost 80% of the entire House had cleared the DHS appropriations bill that was included in the package that the Senate was going to vote on that the House had already passed. And then it came over here, and the Democrats decided to blow it up. All of a sudden, the bill that they helped negotiate and write and be a part of, which included all the reforms that I mentioned, de-escalation training, body cameras, all those things were included in the bill that they said they didn't then want to pass. So they wanted a separate discussion about those issues and demanded that if we didn't give them that, they weren't going to vote for the package. And so they got what they wanted. And then we had a debate about how long should the CR go for to allow the sides to come together behind an agreement. And I suggested, Mr. President, our side suggested that perhaps 6 weeks would be a sufficient amount of time to have an earnest negotiation with all the parties at the table, and then time to execute actually passing whatever is agreed upon across the floor of the House and the Senate and getting on the President's desk. The Democrats demanded a 2-week CR, or they wouldn't vote for the package. And so they got what they wanted, which is a 2-week continuing resolution to fund the Department of Homeland Security and the other things I mentioned, FEMA, TSA, Coast Guard, all those things, for 2 weeks. And yet they haven't appeared yet to want to negotiate on all the things that they're demanding. They put out a list of demands yesterday. Our team, our folks, have tried to get with them to sit down at the table and with the White House to reach an agreement that would enable the Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill to actually be passed here in the Senate and the House and sent to the President. But that is not right now even in the realm of possibility, Mr. President, because they're not engaging. We've got a now 1 week and 1 day time frame in which to do this, which is entirely unrealistic. And a Democrat Party in both the House and the Senate, which seems a lot less interested in getting a solution to this than they do in having a political issue. Mr. President, if for some reason the Department of Homeland Security ends up in a shutdown, it is going to be totally on them. They will own it. We have tried repeatedly. They have agreed repeatedly before they decided not to agree and to demand something else, which they also got. But as of right now, we aren't anywhere close to having any sort of an agreement that would enable us to fund the Department of Homeland Security. And so, Mr. President, I would hope that the Democrats will come to the table. The timeline that they asked for has been granted, and I hope that they are finally ready to get this done. It's important for the American people. All these agencies, Federal Emergency Management Agency, which oversees disasters in this country. We've got a number of weather-related disasters in this country that are going to require the able attention of FEMA. A lot of important agencies, Mr. President, that won't go funded if they remain in this posture of resisting anything that doesn't give them all of their demands. But worse yet, Mr. President, not only insisting on all the demands, most of which are, as they know, very unrealistic and unserious, but perhaps even more important than that, at least as of right now, not even willing to engage in a negotiation and discussion to try and reach a result. Mr. President, I hope that changes. I want to get this done. We want to get this done. I hope that there are Democrats who also want to get this done, and I know the President of the United States is prepared to sign a bill once these negotiations get underway and we reach an agreement. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, for months, Americans have watched him and do the right thing. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, last night the minority leader came out with a new list of demands designed to protect illegal immigrant criminals. You just heard him speak about it on the floor just a few minutes ago. The minority leader has said that he has 10 demands. Last week he had 3. Now he says he has 10. I read the fine print. It looks to me that this ballooning list is now up to 23 demands. The minority leader just said Republicans are calling the demands political. Well, I see them as radical and extreme. This is about funding the Department of Homeland Security for our nation, keeping our nation safe. The minority leader said Republicans can't explain why their demands are extreme. Well, I'll tell you why they're extreme, because they prioritize the safety of illegal immigrant criminals over the safety and security of the American people. And I would think a majority of Americans would see that as extreme and dangerous. Now, the minority leader might think that he has leverage to defund law enforcement. He's wrong. Border Patrol is funded. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is funded. To me, what is reckless here from this far left wish list is it's closing the Federal Emergency Management Agency, closing them down. Coast Guard working without pay. TSA agents working without pay. Making our nation more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Those are all things that are funded by the Department of Homeland Security. So that's why I tell you that these demands are radical. It is the demand to change the rules regarding immigration enforcement warrants. And that's a big part of what they're talking about. When Democrats say they want to, quote, improve warrant procedures and standards, sounds nice. I'm not a lawyer. You study it, you look into it, because you hear the Democrats use that phrase a lot. What Democrats won't tell you is the people that benefit from that are criminals. Here's what this Democrat demand actually does. I'll tell you because Senator Schumer refuses to tell us what it does. It ends immigration enforcement. Ends it. If Immigration and Customs Enforcement is forced to use what are called judicial warrants for each and every immigration arrest, America will become a sanctuary country. Not just a bunch of sanctuary cities in 13 different states. No, an entire sanctuary country. That's what they are pushing for. And that is their goal, and it is a destructive goal for our nation. Democrats want to abolish ICE. You've seen them, the signs being carried in the streets. They want to abolish borders. They want to turn America into a sanctuary country for illegal immigrants, and specifically for illegal immigrant criminals who Joe Biden let flush into this country all the way through 4 years, 10,000 a day illegal immigrants coming into the nation. Democrats had their way, removing illegal immigrants from our communities, from our streets, would be nearly impossible. Today, more than 1 million illegal immigrants have received from the courts a final court order for removal. Democrats want every single one of them to stay in our communities, to stay on our streets and in our neighborhoods all across the country forever. If you have a final removal order, you have already gone before an immigration judge, you presented your case, you've received due process, you exhausted every possible appeal. After a fair and thorough process, a judge has affirmed you may not stay in this country any longer. Finish. It is time for you to go. It's the law. Federal immigration officials have used administrative warrants for decades. Federal law provides for them. The Supreme Court upheld their constitutionality in 1960. We're talking 65 years ago. Federal circuit courts have reaffirmed their use in decade after decade after decade. Senate Democrats want to overturn long-term constitutional precedent. Why? Because Democrats seek to dismantle immigration enforcement completely. The Democrat demand is not a minor adjustment. If Democrats have their way, it would lead to fewer arrests, fewer removals, lead to more illegal immigrant criminals released onto the streets in our communities and into our neighborhoods. That's what this is about. The Senate should be very clear-eyed about the Democrats' goals and the dangerous consequences of the demands that are being made by Senator Schumer and the Democrats just to fund the Department of Homeland Security, something that we've agreed to do in the weeks prior to their decision a week ago to just say no. They said, nope, we're done. Joe Biden and the Democrats spent 4 years ignoring our nation's immigration laws. They are the party of wide open borders. They have been. They've proven it. They brought back catch and release. They abused parole powers, and they demonized law enforcement. They demonized the very men and women who devote their lives and commit their careers to keeping our nation safe. As a result, 10 million illegal immigrants flooded into the country, and our communities became less safe because Democrats refused to enforce the law. In Georgia, Laken Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student, she was murdered by an illegal immigrant. Her killer crossed into this country illegally in 2022. The Biden administration released that killer into our country instead of removing him. Before he killed Laken Riley, he was arrested in New York City for child endangerment. Somebody arrested in New York City for endangering a child, despite his crime. What happens in New York City? He was released. Why? Because New York City is a sanctuary city, and now the governor there wants to make it a sanctuary state. Had her killer been in custody, Laken Riley would still be alive today. She would have finished her nursing training and be taking care of patients in her community. In North Carolina, 2 teenagers were killed by an illegal immigrant in a deadly car crash. The killer was driving drunk. His criminal record before the incident was lengthy criminal record. Yet before the crash, his other charges were dismissed by sanctuary cities. North Carolina's legislature passed multiple bills to require local police to get illegal immigrant criminals off the streets. So what happened? Well, North Carolina's pro-crime Democrat governor named Roy Cooper vetoed them all. North Carolina pro-crime Democrat governor named Roy Cooper. 3 vetoes by Roy Cooper, Democrat governor of North Carolina, allowing illegal immigrant criminals to roam freely. And because of Governor Cooper's reckless vetoes, parents had to bury their teenage children. Mr. President, the price when liberal politicians favor illegal immigrant criminals over the safety of American citizens. That's exactly why Republicans passed the Laken Riley Act. Because of that law, the Department of Homeland Security has detained an additional 20,000 illegal immigrants who otherwise would have been released back into our communities. When it comes to public safety, to fail the American people. Now, Senate Republicans will not accept changes that make our communities less safe. And when I read Senator Schumer's list of the 23 demands, he may call it 10, it started as 3. These are things that will make our communities less safe. Republicans are going to continue to stand on the side of safer and more secure communities.
2 months ago, nearly